Literacy through my interest in sports. My Favorite Forms of Literacy by Ben Metzger. As the first child of my family, my parents wanted to be very quick on getting me to do all sorts of activities early as a child. This was crucial, because my literacy history began at a very early age. The most important activity to them was laying a foundation for me to read. They have told me numerous stories about constantly reading children's books to me in the morning, during the day, and of course before going to sleep. Obviously, being so young, I do not remember too many of these experiences, but there is one that stands out amongst the rest. I distinctly remember at a young age going to our dining table and reading the newspaper with my dad. I was very curious as to what he was doing every morning. This curiosity turned into an interest to read the paper with him. At that point, I couldn't understand most things in the paper, but this activity sparked a want to read, as well as becoming a representation of quality time spent between my father and I. I had already looked to him for motivation. Seeing that he could read every section of the newspaper made me want to be able to read every section with him. He would go on to point out certain sections every day and ask different what questions to make sure I was comprehending a little and staying engaged in this pastime of ours. This simple activity became a very important literacy event in my early life. Shirley Bryce Heath defines these events as occasions in which written language is integral to the nature of participants' interactions and their interpretive processes and strategies. This event was crucial for my developmental stage of literacy, but since then there have been many more events featuring multiple tasks and assignments that have better shaped my literacy history recently. Through the application of books read to me as a child and the activity of reading the daily paper with my dad, my parents became the first literacy sponsors I had. In Deborah Brand's article, she defines literacy sponsors as any agents, local or distant, concrete or abstract, who enable, support, teach, model, as well as recruit, regulate, suppress, or withhold literacy, and gain advantage by it in some way. As Brandt says in the last piece of her definition, sponsors gain advantage of literacy in some way. My parents gained advantage of reading books to me early and encouraging me because I would go on to become a successful student. My parents set a great base for me to build on my literacy, and were pretty much rewarded for it through my great academic career. Even though I felt I received nice grades, it wasn't without its struggles. For example, sitting in this type of classroom, writing, used to make me feel very uncomfortable and trapped in a way. For some reason, under certain situations, I felt the need to second guess both what and how I wrote. After working with a tutor, another literacy sponsor, for a period of time, I became much more confident in my style of writing. I was able to stop second guessing myself as much and fine-tune the process of taking thoughts in my mind and transitioning them to knowledgeable writing. Reading and writing habits have seemed to be somewhat of a roller coaster in my life. When I was young, I truly enjoyed reading pretty much anything. But as I got older, the limitations put on me for reading in school really slowed down my want to read. One of the first necessary limitations that I had encountered in school was the dreaded summer reading list. This list would rarely feature books that I had a particular interest in. I believe that being forced to read books in the summer destroyed, for the moment, my passion for reading. As I sat down in my room to read required books, the primary thought was, when is this going to be over? Now, I believe that when you are truly interested in something, you don't ask when it's going to be over. Instead, you are focused and engaged on the topic. Reading these summer reading books simply did not interest me at the time. I would understand better later that there have to be forced readings done in an educational institution. But for now, the heavy load and structure of reading left me feeling very dejected. In this instance, school was a literacy sponsor that regulated what I had to read. Because of these rules saying, read this book, not that book, I had to read what were on the list that the schools gave me. I felt that my school only counted reading as a book or article that they had chosen for me to read, and most material that I found interesting wasn't considered appropriate for school-based literacy. Reading these books were not as fun for me. Through the years, it made me neglect reading anything for fun. Although my interest in reading slowed down for a while, there seemed to be a switch in my life, and my parents figured that doing some type of reading was better than not reading anything at all. There came a time around the 5th or 6th grade where I simply did not enjoy to read. Reading had become so limited, and as Deborah Brandt said earlier, suppressed from fun reading. I was now only reading at school with much reluctance. As my main motivators in everything, though, my parents wanted me to get more engrossed in reading. They had set out to get me novels and types of magazines they thought I would like, just to read something. Most of these books contained sports stories, something I was very interested in. Now previously, I had read the occasional sports book that caught my interest, but now I had numerous resources to turn to. All of these books were very inspiring to me. They were stories about my kids my age doing well and overcoming the odds at their respective sports. It was motivating to hear these kids hit the walk-off home run or score the winning touchdown. They did everything they could to march their team to victory. I also read the biographies of my favorite athletes at the time, including Derek Jeter, Alex Rodriguez, and Tiger Woods. Their stories reinforced the idea to me that if you work hard, anything you want can happen. This idea impacted me at an athletic level as well as an academic level. At an age when I was always playing sports, and anything to do with sports is my favorite activity, these books motivated me in games while giving me the opportunity to read. Receiving all this material to read from my parents was another literacy event. All this new and interesting information really made me happier and focused when reading. I was even more happy when I was able to take reading for fun and then, brush it off and start reading more advanced books that I had to do for school. Overall, the most important detail was that I was reading again. And even though it wasn't school related, it definitely did help my schoolwork. As I progressed, I got books that contained higher reading levels in the sports stories. This only boosted my comprehension. Reading sports novels, biographies, and articles might not be the most recognized subject by schools, but participating in something of interest to me while reading truly benefited me. And I am very thankful to my first literacy sponsors for laying out the base to read and write, as well as setting me up to enjoy reading both interesting and not as interesting topics.